Um, yeah, I still haven't figured out how to upload the videos. For those of you who are in my landlord class, which I assume is most of you, I'll seek technical assistance to upload the videos. Right. Okay. So, equity and trust. A couple of things, sort of housekeeping measures first. So this, you know, is a one-semester course. I do not like teaching equity and trust as a one-semester course. I think it's really a full subject. Most students tend to find it quite challenging. So one of the things I want you to bear in mind is we will probably ask you towards the end of the semester what your experience has been like, whether you like to keep it a one-semester course. Unfortunately, not for yourself, of course, but for your juniors, or whether you would like it to be a full-year course. So it used to be a full-year course for the LLB, but then last year they decided to reduce it to one semester without consulting me, because I wasn't around when they made that decision. So I'm trying to reverse that decision. The question is whether the JD course should follow the LLB and become a full-year course or not. So, you know, I know some of you already have very strong views, but keep an open mind, and at the end of towards the end of the semester, if you can give feedback to your class representatives, and then give feedback through your class representatives to the JD program director, that would be appreciated, because you know that we are implementing this co-teaching arrangement. And so, you know, if the JDs also decide to go full year, then it's easier to coordinate with the LLBs going full year as well, right? So this is the only law. This is my fourth law school. CityU is my fourth law school. It's the only law school where I've ever taught equity and trust in one semester. Right? Most other law schools do it either in a full year. I have been in a law school where they had these 1.5 type courses, where equity and trust was a 1.5 course. But in CityU, there's just no flexibility for a 1.5 course. So it's either a one semester or else it's a full year. So that's basically the choice that you have. All right. So secondly, in terms of tutorials, most of you will be in the tutorial by Dr. Brian Sloan. Brian is a Cambridge fellow, so you're very lucky to have Brian here in Hong Kong to teach you equity and trust. Unfortunately, 1/4 of you are kind of stuck with me, right? Because Brian wants to do some research whilst he's here, so he's only taking 3 classes, not all the tutorials. I know that some of you want to get into my class, not because of me, but because the timing suits you. Unfortunately, it's full, so you will need to find somebody in that class to swap with, right? Because otherwise, the class sizes are too imbalanced. All right? So, other than that, do you all have any questions for me in terms of basic housekeeping stuff? If not, we will begin. I don't like teaching equity and trust in one semester, as I've said. I also don't like teaching it in this semester because you are concurrently doing land law, most of you. Those of you who have done land law first and then doing equity and trust may find it easier. Because in land law, particularly land law 1, later on in the semester, you will find that some of the topics you will cover. All right, and so it's usually easier to run this course after you've done land law, or at least after you've done land law 1, which is the way the LLBs have it. Okay, but so you're going to have to kind of puzzle things together yourself, somewhat. I will give you pointers, okay, but it's very compressed, so I don't have the time to cover everything that you've done in land law. Okay? So, with that out of the way, let us begin. So, although the course is called Equity and Trust, most of the course we will focus on the trust. Right? Equity, I won't talk very much about, partly because you should know equity by now. Right? Whether in legal system, contract, or you will have encountered equity, right? Albeit maybe not as much as I would like. Okay. So first thing, how do you define equity? So first thing you all should know, up until the late 19th century in England, you had two parallel bodies of law administered by two separate courts. Actually, there were more historically, but we're really focused on two. So the common law, narrowly defined. Now, the word common law is, of course, very ambiguous because you could mean common law as distinct from civil law, in which case we're talking about legal traditions. And the common law legal tradition versus the civil law legal tradition. Now that is a matter of comparative law. And when you use common law in the legal tradition sense, what you then include in this expression is statute under common law decisions by common law courts, equity decisions by chancery, because all of this is common law within the common law tradition. So that's one way of defining common law. Right? The other way of defining common law, which is what we are going to use here, is to distinguish the common law from equity. Right? Now, the common law, the narrow definition, is the law that is administered by the Court of King's Bench, Court of Common Pleas, and the Exchequer. The main court is the Court of King's or Queen's Bench, depending on who the reigning monarch is. So currently, it's the Queen's Bench, right? But when the current Queen dies, it will be the King's Bench, right? Either Charles, or if it skips Charles to, who is it? It's not Harry. William, yes. Right? So it will revert to the King's Bench. Okay? And by that, we also mean judge-made law. We're not talking about statute here. The narrow definition of common law does not include statute. Right? It's purely judge-made law. On the other hand, equity is that body of law administered by the Court of Chancery. Okay? Now, those of you who have, actually you should all be relatively familiar with the law reports. Right? You've looked at the law reports, right? There is a particular series of the law reports called the official reports. Okay? These are the most authoritative reports because they're published by the Cooperative Council of Law Reporting of England and Wales, and they are usually vetted by the judges before publishing, which is why they are almost always the last to come out. So Weekly Law Reports always publishes the case before the official reports. And if you look at the official report series, there are a couple of series within the official reports. One, of course, is appeal cases, all decisions from currently now the Supreme Court, previously the House of Lords, and the Privy Council, AC. Right? You will also remember QB and KB. Those are Queen's Bench, King's Bench. Right? So the common law division of the courts. And then CH, which is the Chancery division of the courts. Okay? So that's that Chancery thing there, although now we don't have that division anymore. So like I said, historically there were other courts. Oh, sorry, I haven't... Sorry. Historically there were other courts, most notably or infamously the Star Chamber, which originally served a purpose not unlike the equity, which was to ensure that laws were fairly enforced against the rich and powerful, but which by the mid-17th century became synonymous with oppression instead, and was finally abolished in the mid-17th century. Alright? So, sorry, the projector will take a while to warm up. Unfortunately, these are not laser projectors, so the bulb needs to warm up. So, historically, there were many court systems, most of which now you don't really have to care about. So you really only need to care about the two main ones, which is common law and equity. All right? So, yeah, that's that. Now, as I've said, common law used to mean at least three different things. The widest meaning is basically both common law courts, judge-made laws, statutes, and equity. Right? That's common law tradition. Slightly narrower, it simply means judge-made law. Here you exclude statute, but you include equity, right? But most narrowly, and the one that we will try to use most often when we refer to common law is common law, which is basically just judgment rules by the common law courts, therefore excluding both statutes and equity decisions out of the chancery courts. Okay? So we come then to the historical origins of equity. Right? The chancery system that we today associate with equity actually predates equity. Right? The chancery existed before there was something called equity. And it was historically not a court, it was a department of state. Right? And the office of the chancellor is an ancient one, dating back, according to some sources, to before the Norman conquest in 1066. This, of course, is William the Conqueror. Right? And why we use law French in English law. Normans are French. Historically, the chancellor was almost always a clergyman, basically a priest, and one of his functions was to serve as the keeper of the Great Seal of the realm. That's a picture of the Great Seal, not on the statue, not the actual Great Seal. The office is a very, very senior one, at least in formal hierarchy, and theoretically outranks the Prime Minister. Of course, it doesn't have as much power as the Prime Minister, but theoretically ranks higher than the Prime Minister. The only person outside, of course, of the monarch that ranks higher than the Chancellor is the Lord High Steward, but there isn't a permanent Lord High Steward. He's really only appointed whenever you need to coronate the new monarch. Okay, so the judicial function of chancery originated out of the forms of action, okay, that historically governed the commencement of litigation. Have you heard of the forms of action? This is not cause of action. Okay. Today, when you study civil procedure, you learn causes of action, right? You learn the elements of the cause of action. No, this is something else altogether. The forms of action are literally forms that you have to use to institute your action. All right. Now, the problem is that you need to go and get a royal writ from the chancery to start your action. Now, so long as, sorry, yep. Now, so long as the chancery could invent new writs, new forms of action, this is not a problem. Now, why would you need new writs? Well, because human beings are complex creatures, and human society is even more complex, and you get into all kinds of new forms of trouble. Right? You stop one kind of fraud, a new kind of fraud comes about. So you need to find a new form of action to start your action. Right? Things change all the time. Even if you imagine that technology is stagnant, human behavior will change. Okay? And so long as you could do this, really, you don't need to invent this thing called equity. Right? Because you just go to the chancery. At this point, it's not a court function. All it does is it issues new forms. Right? So yesterday, people only beat people. Nobody threatened. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, there were no threats. So you only had the equivalent of a form of action for battery. Right? But the next day, somebody threatens to beat you without beating you. Now, the battery form of action wouldn't work because you haven't been beaten. Right? So you need a new form of action. Right? For what we now call the tort of assault. Now, so long as the chancellor can issue a new form of action, fine, the court system still works. The problem was, in 1258, under the provisions of Oxford, forced upon Henry III by essentially an uprising of course, usually the elites. The peasants don't usually rise up. The chancellor was prevented from issuing new writs without the permission of the king's councils. This is what led to the ossification, the stultification, the freezing in time, essentially, of the common law. Right? Because essentially now you had fixed writs, and that was it. Up until 1258, the writs that existed. No new writs, can be invented. Right? This, of course, creates a lot of problems. Now,